That I saw, but now your face is also in.
No, I've been trying to understand Tu B'Shvat because I'm going to speak a little bit about that tonight, as well as the Sedra. Because Tu B'Shvat is something which we just take for granted. We say, you'll eat 15 fruits and you'll be happy. I want to tell you something. There's a connection between Tu B'Shvat, believe it or not, and Purim. And you'll have to guess what that is if you can. I guarantee you, it took me a long time from the Medrash to get it. And I'll go through as follows. In the Megillas Esther, we've got the following, which is a very interesting one. The Vayitlo es homen al ha'etz. They hung homen on the tree. You remember the story where the king heard Haman had prepared a gallows for Haman and for Mordechai in his garden, and he himself was hung on this. Now, Medrash comes down, and I must tell you, some of the Medrashim are wonderful, because there we got a Medrash which says that there was a massive argument between the different trees. You won't believe this, but every tree wanted to hang Haman. Everybody wanted. They all had a different excuse to hang him. What were the trees? The fig tree, the grapes, the pomegranates, the nut tree, the esrog tree, the hadas, the myrtle, the olive, the tapuach, an apple, the dates, the arava, the willows, the eres cedar. They all wanted the privilege to come along, because they all said that Klal Yisrael are compared to these trees, and they were standing up to defend Klal Yisrael by hanging Haman on these trees. Now, in honor of Tu B'Shvat, I'm going to examine with you not all of the Sheva Minim, but I'm going to try and give you a little understanding as to some of the Sheva Minim and why they are so important and connected with Klal Yisrael, because there's an attribute of each of them that will refer to Klal Yisrael. So let's start first of all, Te'eno. I don't know if you know this, but Te'eno is the first fruit mentioned in the Sheva Minim, in all the first fruits, because it's representing Klal Yisrael, who were considered to be the firstborn of all the nations in the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us from everybody else. We were the first, just like our forefathers were the origins of Klal Yisrael, of the New Judaism. So also we as Klal Yisrael are the firstborns for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore they were coming along and they were saying, it is the duty of the firstborn to come along. And if you remember, when we left Mitzrayim, the first message that was sent to Pharaoh was, B'ni B'chayri Yisrael. B'ni B'chayri Yisrael means my firstborn. We want him out of the land of Egypt. So we are referred to as the B'chayr. And this B'chayr, you will find in many places, the B'chayr has a responsibility towards Klal, towards the family. I don't know whether you realize this, by the way. Do you remember when Esau was making his lentil soup? What did Yaakov want to buy from him? He wanted to buy his birthright. Now, this was nothing to do with a Yerusha, an inheritance, because what he was referring to was worrying him. The firstborn was the one who would decide the makeup, the spiritual growth of the family. And it applies today as well. Always the firstborn seems to be the one who's loved the most. You're my firstborn son. You hear this, or my firstborn daughter. People comment and say this, you are my firstborn. And therefore you have an extra responsibility in carrying on. And they wanted to come along and they wanted to have the opportunity of the zechus to hang Haman, because they consider themselves to be responsible for Klal Yisrael and the protection of Mordechai at the time. The next fruit is Gefen, the vine. You all know the song when they get a chosn and kala get engaged. Inve hagefen, ve'inve hagefen, davar no mekubal. What does it mean? The grapevine of the vines and the grape of the vines are a wonderful things when they interweave. Dover no, it's the most beautiful thing and very acceptable. Why do we talk about that? Surely, if you want, take an orange, put it with another orange, make it a bigger orange. Take an apple with a red apple, a sweet apple, a sour apple, put it together, make something. Why is it dafka with grapes? Well, first of all, you should know that the grapes are only important by themselves if they're just grapes. But something which is even more important than the grape and that is what comes from the grape, gefed, the wine. Have you ever noticed that when you have a grape, you say barei pri ha'etz? But what do we make on the wine? Barei pri hagofen. It's the only one. If you drink apple juice, you don't make a special bracha. Some people say just shako. Orange juice. I mean, you just make a bracha. It's only the juice of the fruit. And yet the juice of a grape is considered to be something so special, so important, that we use it for kiddush. And that's something very, very important. But how do we get the wine? How do we get the wine from the grape? You have to squeeze it. Is that correct? You squeeze it in order to get it. What we're saying here is for Klal Yisrael, it's always been known that in order to get the best out of Klal Yisrael, they have to be pressurized and pressed. You know, we use the wine. When do we use it? At a bris, pidyon haben, wedding, kiddush, havdalah. There is not an occasion in any part of our lives that we don't use the wine, and it's shared at a Suda, this Barei Pri Hagofen, demonstrating that we channel all our joy towards the service of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. We're squeezing the grape in order to be able to drink it. We're drinking it and we're talking about, you know, the Goyim come along. The attitude of the world, what is it? Eat, drink, and be merry, because you might not be around tomorrow. This is an Echtikan talk. Eat, drink, and be merry. We don't have that attitude. I'm sorry. We've never had that attitude. Our attitude is a very difficult one. We harness all our physical desires, and we don't eat and drink just to be merry. When we misameach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why the Geffen wanted, because he said we play an integral part in the survival, in the simcha of Klal Yisrael, and that's why they wanted to hang homin on it. Next we come to the pomegranate, a rimain. What do we say? That Klal Yisrael is mole riman kemitzvahs. Mole mitzvahs keriman. We're full of good deeds like a pomegranate. Have you ever noticed something, by the way? Cut a pomegranate. The next time you can do this, I'm cheating, by the way. I'm already pipped. So it's easier for me to say having to schlep it and turn it and break it. If you cut a pomegranate, it's got a lot of pith in it, correct? Just push it apart. And what happens? It all jumps out. It just takes one knock on one bit of the pomegranate for everybody to follow suit. Have you ever noticed it? I'm going to tell you a beautiful story. There was a Hasidic Rebbe. He was asked at the time that you remember the invention, before our times, all of us, when the steam train was invented. Yeah? I think it was the beginning of the last century. Was it Stevenson and his trains or somebody? And they said, what did he say? They came to the Rebbe, Rebbe, what do you think of the steam train? And the Rebbe turned around and says, oh, Nishkin Groiseglik, nothing amazing. They looked at him, but Rebbe, look at the miracle. The train, the engine is schlepping. He says, that's what I'm trying to tell you. One person who's full of hot enthusiasm can schlep along 8 carriages, 8 other people with them. If you have got that enthusiasm and you're able to get to people, you can encourage them to join you and be part of your chabura, your group. It is a fact, isn't it? How do children learn? They learn, you know, this expression by parents, don't do as I do, do as I say. Doesn't work, does it? Never has worked. You have to do as I do. And that's what the engine is pulling. That's what the pomegranate is telling us. The pomegranate has to be, the actual pomegranate has to be there. And we'll look at the slice of this pomegranate, the seeds. It's not apparent at the beginning, but if you just tug on 1 or 2, it dislodges dozens and dozens of other seeds. So it's surprising, but the number of mitzvahs which are hidden behind the surface. So we find this, that some people don't even seem to possess the merit of Torah, and they spend very little time studying it. However, but they're credited with the merits of Torah because they support others who study Torah. You don't even believe it. Talmudic teaching, we can suggest, that the Remainim on the Me'il, where they have them on the Me'il, the breastplate, it says there that was to teach us to refrain from speaking Lashon Hara, because it's actually, think about it, a lot of the pomegranate is hidden. Stum. It's very, very quiet. So the pomegranate said that, he said, every moment a person closes his mouth and refrains from speech, he gets a hidden light, and no angel or creator can fathom. And this type of merit is one way that we may not be discernible at first glance, but a little tug will reveal that even the simple Yidden who control their tongues hold within them tremendous merit. Do you hear what I'm saying here about the Riemann? A Riemann is trying to tell us that with every Jew, if you're able to open them up carefully, you'll find hidden there's something very, very special in them. You know, it's very interesting, but last week I sat Shiva for my brother. I haven't said Kaddish once because I couldn't get to shul. There's no shul. And yet, so many people who keep nothing will run to shul, will find a way of getting to shul to say a Kaddish, because it opens them up. Their hearts, the strings have been pulled. And that's what the pomegranate is teaching us. And that's why they said, let me hang Haman and show him he's not an example for us to follow. The next one I want to talk just very quickly is the olive. Now, the olive, you all know the olive. You squeeze it, you get more out of it. The olive is used in the Beis HaMikdash for the karbonos, for the sacrifices, but it's also used for the menorah. Do you remember I spoke to you about the menorah? Only the best can be used because it's shemen, zay, zoch, kosis lamoya. Because Torah has to be pure, but the menorah represents the Torah, and therefore it had to be pure. The Lubavitcher Rebbe comes along and he says, you know the beauty of olive oil? He said, put it on top of water and it will float. He said, that's Klal Yisrael. That was Mordechai. That was Esther. That was how we should be, floating on top, not to mix and get involved with other things which are not correct. But you know, I'll never forget what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. There's another side to it. Have you ever noticed that with the Arba Minim? By the way, I want to emphasize something to you. While I talk tonight about Purim and other and all the Arba Minim for Sukkot, if something can be fit into all the Yomim Tovim, if something can be fit into other parts of Yiddishkeit, you know it's a true thought. If it can't, it's not a good thought. You know, Lord Jacobus used to tell me, if you make a sermon, he said, you know the proof of it's good? He said, if you can use it for a wedding, a bar mitzvah, or a levaya, is knowing how to twist and use it, because you're teaching Torah on a simcha or on something which is sad. And here we're getting the oil, the olive oil. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, pour oil on a table, it will spread like wildfire. Pour it on the glass, it will float at the top. The same thing he says with the Arba Minim. Keep the esrog separate, but when you come to do the mitzvah, put it together. And I'm going to say this with the greatest of respect. There is nobody who could turn around and say, it's below my dignity to mix with anybody. Everybody has to be part of Klal Yisrael. Do you know, I'll get you Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Onu matirim, we are permitted lehispalel im ha'avayonim, to pray with those who are sinners in Klal Yisrael. We're saying this in Kol Nidre to emphasize that we can't stand up and say we're perfect. Mutar lispalel im ha'avayonim. We ask everybody, if you want your prayers to be answered, make sure there are other people who don't keep everything, and they're there to feel us come in. We'll come in a minute to what we call Emunah, and we call Gaiva, and we talk about modesty, humility. We'll come to that in a second. So here we've got the olive. The olive comes to tell us, he said, if a Jew doesn't make a kiddush, for the non-Jew makes Havdalah, it's that he'll make up like a separation. We bring kiddush in order to be able to bring the community together. So you've seen now, very simple, from a few things. We then come to the last one I want to talk about tonight, and that is dekel. Dekel's a palm tree. And you know what we refer to dekel is, in fact, it's to do with the fruit tamar. Tamar is a date, but we don't call it a date. We don't call it tamar, we call it a dekel, because the tree is identical to the fruit. Did you know that? The tree and the fruit are identical. Cut the branch and you'll smell and taste exactly like the trunk itself. And it's straight and upright. And this has kept Klal Yisrael going out throughout our ages. Our single-minded focus, toichai keboiroi, our inner self has to be equal to the way we behave in the outside world as well. So here you've had it now. And the commandment to the Torah is teaching us that we've got to be very careful what we eat and to do nothing. He says we've got to be an intelligent person, should eat and drink, not with the intention of giving his throat pleasure, but with the intention of keeping his body healthy. Very big difference. You know, I got a position in Kaifeng. It's a Chinese restaurant. And the owner there, he's a Chinaman. And I want to tell you, it's an amazing thing. We were talking about the pandemic. He's had a cure. He's had a cure for cancer, a cure for this. He says, I cure, he said, not the illness. I cure the body. Do you hear this? This is what we're talking about here. Every single one of these fruits are there for the goof, for the body, for the avodas Hashem. So let's remember when we eat, and when you did eat this week, and when we do eat Shabbos as well, we're eating it l'shem shamayim in order to give our body the opportunity for avodas Hashem. That's a little bit about Tu Bishvat. Now let's look at the Sedra. And I want to tell you, the more I read it, and the more I look into this pandemic, and by the way, I had my first injection this week, so I'm still in pain in my arm. It's really sore, but nevertheless, I've done my hashtadlus, as they say. I've done my bit, and I hope you all will get an injection and do it, because we have to shmear as haguf. We have to protect our body and not turn around and take the problem. There's a bit of a joke going on at the moment. I don't know whether you know, there's the Pfizer injection, and there's one from Oxford University. The Haredim want the Oxford University, because on the side of the crucible, therefore, it's got OU, which is the American Herscher. So they've misunderstood. It's Oxford University, not the Herscher from America. So they shouldn't think you're getting a Herscher from your pandemic. Let's now look at the Sedra and see what we can learn.
Rabbi, you're on mute.
Yeah. Rabbi.
Yeah, we're back again.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't know what happened there. Oh, I think I touched something. Sorry. I want to tell you, I'll talk about women and what their responsibility is. It's an interesting situation. However, let's start at the beginning. The beginning starts off with Emunah. And we'll talk about this word Emunah. Klal Yisrael did not go straight into the sea. What did they have to do? They said that they jumped in up to his neck in the water, but that wasn't the reason. Eventually, Moshe Rabbeinu went, and they all went in, and they showed Emunah. How did they go in? How was it the crossing? The winds blew. Was it just one pathway, and they all walked over? No. You have to look directly at the Medrash. And the Medrash tells us there were 12 tunnels. And on those 12 tunnels, you could see, everybody could see their neighbor. Yes, they could see each other going through. And if you were thirsty, all you had to do was go to the wall, put a glass in it, and you could drink the water. It was fresh water in the side of the wall. There was fruit hanging from it. Could you imagine going on a picnic across the sea, covered in water? They were scared stiff. They were paranoid. They were scared the water would come down on them, Klal Yisrael. So what did the Kodesh Baruch Hu say? Look at your neighbor. Be safe. I'm not going to drown you all. I've told you. I'm going to take you out. You're going to come out with me. The whole inyan, the whole purpose of crossing in channels was that each Jew would understand he has a responsibility to give security to his family, to his neighbors. You hear what we're saying here? People are coming along and saying at the moment, oh, don't have this injection and don't do this and don't do that. And the other thing which is going on here in London, I don't know if it's going on in Amsterdam, but this last week, I think there were 50 weddings reported. And one wedding was a massive wedding, if you saw about it, where the police had to come to Yisod HaTorah. There weren't 400 people, there were 250. But you know something? It's not fair. Klal Yisrael have a halacha. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh lezeh. I never go out anywhere, when I do go for that little bit, without wearing a mask. I put it on, however uncomfortable it is, I put on a mask. I keep my distance. I haven't even kissed my grandchildren for the last year and a half. And it's very difficult, but I have a responsibility to them. I don't know, chas v'sholem, if I've got it or don't have it. That's why the Torah is coming to teach us. Again, I've proven in almost every Sedra there is a message for this pandemic. So the first message is, be careful. Remember, you have a responsibility towards your friends. Now let's go on a little bit further. And I love learning this because you're going to learn something here, which I found. When you do a bit of research and you find Sforim, it's such a machaya. The end of the Sedra. What was the end of the Sedra this week? Amalek, Yimach Shemar, comes along. And by the way, it's very appropriate that we read Amalek this week. You know what yesterday was? Yesterday was Holocaust Memorial Day. And we had a special service here in Boreham Wood when it was lighting. You see, you light a light to take away the darkness. Ladies, I don't know if you know this. Have you ever asked yourself the question, and this is only my reasoning behind this, by the way, why do you light 2 candles on Friday night? Now, give me the answer, Shomer v'zocher. Okay, the 2 different words in the 10 Commandments, which we'll talk about next week. That's one reason. I'll give you a very down-to-earth reason. Every time you light 1 candle, you bring light into that area you are in. Correct? You light a candle for your home. Do you remember the halacha? If you've only got enough oil for Shabbos candles and not enough oil for Hanukkah candles, what do we light? We light the Shabbos candles. Why? Because Shabbos candles bring shalom bayis. The light that you light, ladies, that 1 light in the house is the shalom bayis. The second light is your influence outside of the home. Not just in the house, but outside. Toichai keboiroi. The in part of the home is like the outside of the house. Your behavior outside should be like your behavior in the house. The same thing as well in our behavior to mitzvahs. When we do a mitzvah, our inner avodah, our inner service should be identical to that of the avodah. It's not just lip service to anything. That's tefillah. Tefillah comes from the heart. Tefillah is not just some opening your mouth and saying a few things. So now we come to the end of the Sedra. And I'll come back to other things as well in a minute. And the end of the Sedra says that Amalek attacked Klal Yisrael. Those, how did they do it? As we learn later in the Torah, all the weak ones were the ones who got attacked at the back. My question is a very simple question. Nobody's ever asked it to me, but I'm going to tell you the question. I ask it. If everybody saw what happened in Egypt, and you saw the 10 plagues, the Maccas, you saw the crossing of the Red Sea, you saw the miracles, you saw the punishments and everything that happened, and the protection that the Jewish people had from God, would you want to start with them? And there, let me tell you, Egypt was a far greater nation than Amalek. It was a far bigger nation. So my question is, put very, very simply, why did Amalek attack the Jewish people? What right did he have? And why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give him permission? When the other nation that attacked us was destroyed, why weren't they scared? Why weren't Amalek scared? Why wasn't he destroyed? After all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu punished and destroyed a bigger nation called Egypt. And yet, no, they were out to the attack. You know, I saw once the Meforshim come down with different answers, but one of the answers was as follows: that when Amalek wanted to show that the Jewish people were not protected all the time, you could attack them. The protection was only there for a short time. And what worries me is as follows: Bnei Israel were in the desert. What happened? You know, I tell you something, you always say, all we do, and I always say to people when they come and complain and moan to me, you're just like the Jews in the wilderness. You do nothing but complain. Have you ever noticed that there are negative people in this world? They can never see the good in anybody or anyone or anything. That's what we're told we should be looking, only to the good of people. Have you ever noticed it? Have you come to a levaya? Somebody asked me this. Misty. He said, Rabbi, he said, every time I come to a funeral, you always say that the person was such a good person, such a tzaddik. Where do the wicked people get buried? He said, not everybody's such a wonderful person. Why do you always refer to them as good? And I said, when we leave this world, we only want to take with us that which is good. We look, we search, however difficult sometimes, we search to take that which is good. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu could open up the good book in us. Did you know, by the way, that all our mitzvahs are not counted in numbers, but they're measured? Have you ever noticed in Pirkei Avos, we should do a mitzvah kala, like a chamura. We should do an easy, light. It doesn't say an easy mitzvah. Chamura is a heavy one, because all our mitzvahs and our averas are actually weighed. Have you ever heard this one? I'm going to tell you a story. This is actually recorded as well. You know, beautiful stories which you get from the Rebbe. There was a man who died, and he went up to Shemayim. And as he entered Shemayim, the angels, the malachim came, the prosecution and the defense. Well, the defense had nothing to say. He kept stum. But the prosecution came along, and he started off. He took the scales, and he said, let's see if we can bring something for you. At that moment, an angel came on crutches, coming along. He said, hold on. Don't send him down. I'll speak up on his behalf. Now, everybody makes an angel. Whenever you do mitzvahs, you create angels. So the angel said, you know, he said, because of that man, he said, there was a little poor lady who had challahs for Shabbos. He gave her the money to buy the challahs. Oh. So they put the mitzvah of the challahs on the scales. So it started to go down. He said, but because she was baking the matzah, the challahs, she had to go to the flour shop and get flour. She had to go to the mill, whatever you call it, and she got flour. So she gave him a mitzvah. She bought the flour, so she put that mitzvah went on. But then that had to be ground down so he could use it. And so on and so forth. The farmer who cut the wheat got part of the schar for the mitzvah. By the time the angel was finished, you could see the balance had gone on the other side. The balance was in his favor. And he said, the angels turned around and said, you've gained Gan Eden. To which he turned around and he said, thank you very much, but can I ask a question? He said, yes. He said, you've brought me all the proof that I've done all these things, and because of one little thing of buying challahs for that little lady, everybody was included in my mitzvah going back and back and back. He said, tell me, why was the angel limping? I always thought angels were perfect. I'm not going to use the expression here, angels come with wings and harps. I've never seen an angel yet, other than my wife, but other than that, that's a living angel. But I said, tell me, why is the angel limping? To which he turned around and he said, the angel said, do you remember, he said, when that lady came to you and asked you for money for the challahs? He said, what did you do? He said, you went into your pocket, you started to begrudge her, you were cursing and swearing and that, but then you took the money, you threw it on the ground. The moment you took the money out of your pocket, you don't realize you made me. I was perfect. But then you did something stupid. You threw it on the floor and banged your foot down very heavy. But what you didn't realize is that when I was standing there, you stood on my foot and broke it. You damaged the mitzvah. You could have given the money over with a good heart. He said, but you spoiled that mitzvah. That's what happens. So here we see now that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did so many miracles and so many mitzvahs for Klal Yisrael. Listen to this. He took us out of Mitzrayim, and he protected us from the missiles and all the rest of it. What did he do? He gave us food. What food did he give us? Mon. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we just went out our front door and we could just pick up the mon? And if you had faith and you had Emunah, you could taste whatever it was wanted. You wanted tonight, you wanted a lamb chop, or you wanted a steak, it tasted like a steak. But if you just ate it because you had to eat food and no Emunah, no betochen, it tasted of nothing. So here we go. Then he came, he said, we gave you water. When the water was bitter, he said, what did we do? We put the rod in it and it became sweet again. And by the way, I'm going to ask you something. Have you ever noticed that if you eat even sugar, let me tell you, if you eat even sugar and you've got a bitter taste in your mouth, in other words, something is upsetting you, even to take a sweet or a bit of sugar, it will taste bitter. It's not the sugar or the sweet that's bitter. It's you, it's your attitude that's actually bitter. That's what was going on with Klal Yisrael here. The Moneh was the same. The water was bitter. It was the same. And yet it really was beautiful, sweet water. And then they started complaining. And all of a sudden they were saying the water's bitter. Has God left us? You know, Rashi comes along and he tells us a beautiful story. He says, in Rashi it says, a father carried his son on his shoulder. Whenever he wanted something, he would pick it up and give it to his son. They stopped. Listen to this. And the boy said, has anybody seen my father? So the father got so angry, threw him off his shoulder. And as he put him on the ground, the dog came and bit him. He says, now you'll appreciate I was carrying you the whole time, but you took me for granted. So let me tell you, Klal Yisrael started complaining. And when they started complaining about the water, they were bitter. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was upset. He did. What did he do to protect them in the desert? He asked, are they amongst them? Didn't they realize HaKadosh Baruch Hu was amongst them? You remember the story with the snake on the pole? They looked up to God. They were saved from the scorpions. Do you know that the scorpions and the snakes were there the whole time in the desert? And Hashem was protecting them from that? Did you know they didn't have to go into the shop to Marks and Spencer's and buy a new shirt or a new suit or new shoes? These fitted them for the 40 years they were in the midbar. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we didn't have to go shopping during this pandemic and everything was supplied, and it is supplied, if only we would see. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was coming to teach us a lesson. And what did he do? He took Amalek and he sent Amalek to attack us so that we would then appreciate, with all the different signs that were going to be given, they would then start to appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with them the whole time. But it was them. It was they who ran away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what we're talking about, even to this present day. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu does everything. You know, I once mentioned this to somebody and they agreed with me. Do you remember when Avram took Yitzchak to the Akedah, to the binding, and Yishmael came back and told Sarah, your son has been killed on the mountain, and she dropped dead? Do you remember? That wasn't the answer there. That was her time up. That was the catalyst that caused the time to be then. Everybody has their specific times. We'll turn around and we'll say it was this illness, it was this pandemic, it was this, that, and the next thing. Nah, it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is there by HaKadosh Baruch Hu because he's the one who gives us our life, our health, our food, our clothes, our family, our friends. Everything that we have to show appreciation. It's HaKoros HaTov. And that has got to be there all the time. I want to tell you also in this week's Sedra, which I saw, which is also unbelievable, the other thing which we see is Moshe Rabbeinu's his modesty, humility, and nivus. Have you noticed it in the Sedra? He never asks for anything. He never praises himself. You know the story. What is a nivus? What is humility? What is modesty? You know the story. There's one of the Gedolim was traveling, one of the Hasidic Rebbes, and he was looking for a shul. It was Yom Kippur. And he wanted to daven in a shul where there was some next to somebody who, when he davened with a full Emunah. Now, you can tell when somebody's davening with Emunah and Betochen, when the steam comes out, the crying and the tears, Rabbi Shalom. You know, the Berditchever Rov said, he put in 2 pieces of paper, one in each pocket. And in one pocket, he said, Ani offer v'efer. I'm nothing more than the dust of the earth. And in the other pocket, he said, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. Because of me, the world was created. So his Hasidim says, Rabbi, that's a contradiction. Either the world was created because of you, or you're a nothing, you're just earth. He said, let me tell you, he says, when somebody does something wrong, doesn't have Emunah and Betochen, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, I will stand up and I will say, you're destroying my world. But if it doesn't affect me, and I have to just listen to my avodas Hashem, my service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ani offer v'efer. I have to remain humble with humility. So this Rebbe sat there next to this guy who was crying his eyes out, Kol Nidre. Can you just imagine? Tears were flowing. Comes the next morning and comes to the davening again. Oh, he's away. He's crying his out. The Rebbe thinks, this is a machaya. If the Rebbe Shalom will listen to him, he might listen to my tefillahs as well. That's the anivus of Rebbes, by the way, in those days. All of a sudden, somebody gets called up to Shlishi. A balabos, an ordinary poshta balabos. This guy who was standing and started shouting, Chutzpah! What a disgrace! They're giving him that aliyah which I should have had. He said, I'm more important than him. The Rebbe looked at him and said, what's tutzach here? One minute you're saying you're nothing, you're garnished, off of Eifa, you're the dust. All of a sudden you're saying you're more important than him. He says, Rabbi Yidi says, when it comes to the Rabbi Shalom, he says, bin ich garnished. But when it comes to that man there, I'm a lot more important than him. Don't ever think he's more important than me. That's not a nivus. That's a chutzpah. Yes, we are sometimes more humble than other people. That means humility applies across the board. It doesn't just refer to individual situations. And if a person, when he davens, has got to daven with modesty, with humility. Now we come to the last part of the Sedra. And it's a frightening part, because I want to say something to you tonight, and I do not want you, please, to be misconstrued of what I'm saying. You're going to notice, by the way, that there are certain women who are given leadership roles. Have you noticed it? Who's the first one in this week's Sedra? Miriam. Miriam took a tambourine and led the women in song. Now, she didn't open her own minyan, but she did lead the Jewish women in song to come and thank and praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We then come to the Haftarah. What's the Haftarah this week? Devaira. She was a prophetess. Unbelievable. A Neviah. She was a prophetess. And yet she was a general. But the question is, and it's asked, according to the Medrash, you'll see the songs speak more of the events of the future than of the past. It's their composition which has to help us. And these songs are associated with Miriam and with Devorah. Women, heroic Jewish women. Now, if I stop there, please don't go and quote me like that. You know, I had a case where a man was a frum guy. He never missed coming to shul. Machaya. Frum, real frum. All of a sudden, he stopped coming to shul and he gave up Yiddishkeit. And I was very upset. So I went to see him. I said, look, Chaim, I can't understand it. You were one of my staunch members in the shul. I can't understand it. Why have you given up your Yiddishkeit? He said, Rabbi, I've got to be honest and tell you. You gave a sermon every Shabbos for 20 minutes. For 20 minutes, you asked questions. By the time you got to the answers, I was fast asleep. And I left the show full of questions. What do you expect me to do? I didn't get any of the answers. So I want you to stay awake and we'll give you the answers as to why we've got Miriam and Devorah being prophetesses. It says, Vatosha Devorah was a prophetess. She was a judge, not just a prophetess. She was a judge. Now, I want to suggest to you that these were the roles of the men, not of the women. But they were identical and interchangeable, would be to impose contemporary bias on Jewish history. And I must tell you, the males were always the object and never the subject. The women were always the followers, never the leaders. And this is something which I think we've got to understand. So the question which we're going to ask tonight is, what went wrong with Moshe's sister Miriam and with Devorah? Let me go through this with you. The historical generalization can be justified because the Jewish women of biblical times represented the qualities of faithfulness and unqualified commitment. It was the maternal role in Egypt that kept us alive, the integrity of the Jewish family, the authenticity of the ancestral hope, as well as tradition. I'm going to tell you, I visited Russia during the days of the KGB, going right the way back about, this would have been about 40 years ago when I went. And I met, in fact, when one of the refuseniks came out, he came to my son's bar mitzvah. It was such a pleasure. But I went around, I did a wedding when I was there, witnessed to so many different things. And I spoke to a lot of the women, young married women. And I said to them, I used to say this, B'shah tova maslachas, in the course of time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bless you with children. Do you know the answer they gave me? Please, no. We don't want to bring children into this world, in this place. I said, the time will come. I said, when you will be in Eretz Yisrael. I said, my bracha is that you should have children, which they thanked me. And by the way, a lot of them did have the children. So we see here what's going on. You know, Lord Jacobus once told me to fill into this in this subject. He said, men and women were created equal, but with different responsibilities. If any of you ever do a bit of woodwork, and I love woodwork, a hammer and a saw, are they equal? The answer is they're important for the job they have to do. I can only bang a nail in with a hammer, not with a saw. I can only cut a piece of wood with a saw, but not with a hammer. But each of them are important. They're important utensils for what they have to do. And that is something here, we're equal, but with different responsibilities, different capabilities. Lady J used to go mashig about this. She used to say this was the role of the Jewish woman. So the question comes back now. If this was the case, she says, if God chooses whom he wills, whether it's man or woman, and sometimes he's chosen both, starting with Sarah and Avraham. It was a communal appointment. Now look and see, you know, it's interesting. We don't like it that women are in public office. So how then could Devorah serve as a judge? And the answer is very, very simple. And therefore it goes as follows. Devorah was accepted as a judge because she was a judge. Have you been watching the American election? Do you remember that lady who was a judge for goodness knows how many years, that Jewish woman who just retired not so long ago? She became a judge because she deserved to be a judge. In her own right, she was a judge. A person, I've got two ways to achieve recognition, whatever the field of leadership, to be elected or appointed, or the other is to fulfill the function. You can stand up and get elected. It's dead easy these days. But if you're able to fulfill the function without official appointments, that is something very special. That, my friends, is the lesson of this week's Sedra. The Sedra is Miriam took on leadership. She went to the fields. She got the women to go down to the fields so that the men would be with them and have children and be able to bring out a Jewish people. That was her job. She led the women. She was the terrific example, not because she was voted in, but because she stood up above everybody. Devorah, was a prophetess, but that was a gift given to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the thing she was able to do, she was a judge because of her capabilities. Can you get the message now that I'm getting over? And I'm trying to get it as strong as possible. Everybody, man and woman, have responsibilities. But if you've got capabilities, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu's given you those capabilities, use them to defend the Kodesh Baruch Hu, to show Emunah and betochen in a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's what we've got to do. That's the message of this week's Sedra. And I'm going to end with the following. Something which we learned. We say, why do we eat matzah? Why do we eat the matzah? Because it says that the apostle al matzah zushon achlim alzum alma, because they didn't have time to bake. Why didn't they have the time to bake? They knew they were going out of Egypt. Do you know what was going on? We call it lechem oini, poor man's bread. Yes, I call it lechem emunah, the bread of faith. When Moshe went to Klal Yisrael, he said to them at the plague of blood, "I'm taking you out tonight. Get ready." Did he take them out? No. The next plague, Tzefadea, Kinim, Orav, Deva, Shchin, Borod, Abe, Choshech. By the time it came to the plague of darkness, the Jewish people turned on and said, enough is enough. We ain't going. God has taken us on a joyride. He's not going to take us out. So every day, for all the other plagues, they prepared their sandwiches. They had everything ready to take out. But on the plague of the firstborn, they decided we're not going to prepare because we ain't going anywhere. If a child is told, I'm going to take you on a picnic, I want you to get everything ready for it. And the person who's organizing in the kitchen makes all the sandwiches. And the person who was taking says, I'm sorry, I've got an appointment in business. I can't do it today. Do you think that child would believe you anymore? I guarantee you not. He would lose his emunah. He would lose his betochen. Kodesh Baruch Hu said to them, get ready. And he didn't take them out because he was trying to mechanech them. He was trying to educate them. They lost their emunah. And therefore, when they had to leave, they didn't have anything to eat. They had to put their dough in their back and run al shumma. Why did we eat it? Because we had to prepare it on the journey, on the way. So we call it lechem emunah. That's the bread of faith. So ladies, gentlemen, Rabbi Sai, this week's Seder contains so many beautiful messages. Anivus, humility. Emunah, faith. Belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he's there. He supplies us with everything. Have you all got clothes on tonight? You know something, tomorrow we'll make another bracha. Malbish arumim. He clothes the naked. That's us. He gave us our clothes to wear. We're lucky we've got clothes to put on ourselves. Do we appreciate it? When we pokeach ivrim, he gives sight to the blind. Do you know something? Even a blind man has to make that bracha because that person can see in a different way. He gives me the opportunity to discern things. You know, you gave me seichel that the cocker I can distinguish between day and night. I know when it's day. I know when it's night. You gave me a gift. Everything is a gift which we've got to utilize to our full. Oh boy, if only we would realize this. And ladies, I'm going to tell you and finish you off beautifully. Every Friday night, we welcome in Shabbos. Shabbos is called Hamalka. Shabbos is the queen. Sheker hachein, hevel hayofi. Chein, graciousness, is false. Beauty is vanity. Isha yiras Hashem, a woman who is a God-fearing woman, hitisala, she's going to be praised. If I turned around to my wife and said, Miriam, you ain't beautiful. Sheker hachein, that's all false. Chein, you've got no graciousness. She'd throw something at me. So what are we saying? We're saying the translation as follows. Chein and sheker, beauty, to stand in front of a mirror, putting on makeup and looking good is nothing. It's false. It's very false. But Isha, any woman, Yiras Hashem, a woman who is God-fearing, listen to the words. He, she, which woman? The woman who's God-fearing. Tis halal, she will be praised. How are we praising her? For her chein and her yoifi. for her chen, her graciousness and her beauty, because that graciousness and that beauty is not just physical, it's a spiritual chen. You lit the candles, you illuminated the room. The woman, the mother of the house, whoever is charge of it, lights up. The Shabbos lights up our room. The Shabbos is the Malka, the queen. Who's the queen? Is the women of Klal Yisrael. So Rabbi said there's a very big message here. We should be looking to see what we are able to do, and not worry about what we can't do, what we want to do. Kodesh Baruch has given us enough to do. Shalom Asani Isha. He didn't make me a woman. Means very simple. I've got more mitzvahs than my wife. I've got tefillin to put on. I've got tzitzis I've got to wear. She wants to wear them because she doesn't have to. We have the mitzvahs. By the way, did you know that the Sephardim do not make a bracha at sukkahs for the women? Do not make a bracha on sitting in the sukkah or on the lulav or the esrog, because they're not mechuyev. They're not obliged to do it. They're not obliged to do it. You don't make a bracha, they say. We say it because we say bracha lahokil. We say, we're lenient for the women to say it. They want to make a bracha. Sfiras Aimer, again, it says man, groma, it's a time which is a fixed time. My wife always is makpid of counting Sfiras Aimer. We do it. She says she wants to eat the cheesecake at the end. So ladies, can you see in this week's Seder, every bracha is given to you. Take your tambourines out, not on Shabbos. Zu gesund. Because I genossen in the members, Mr. Jacobs, that you sneeze in what I'm saying. All of you, to be able to see that in your families, whether it's a partner, whether it's your children or your grandchildren, to be able to see the chen and the yoifi as something spiritual, something beautiful. When they'll phone you up and tell you, we got to, my granddaughter, I'm boasting, got 100% in her chumash this week. So somebody said to me, but what about her maths? I said, I'll worry about that when the exam comes. At the moment, I'm getting nachas from the Torah. So there you are. Enjoy Shabbos. Be well. Be safe. Please be safe. And if you get the injection,
do our best.
And no, seriously, have it. Have the injection and keep out of danger, because we need you all, and I want you all to be around for many, many more times. Now, I will see you in Mitzvah Shem Yisrael, but the following week, Mishpatim,
You're not there.
I'll explain to you why I'm not there. I don't know whether you know, but Diane Erntroy has been seriously ill. He had major strokes and everything, and he's had operations. And they're doing, on a Thursday night, they're doing learning in his zechus. And I'm a personal friend of his. They asked me, would I mind? I said, I'll be delighted. B'schus, like I do b'schus, Mr. Jacobs. You know, these shiurim are b'schus and the shoma of your wonderful Rebbetzin. And that's that she should be Maile al Kodesh Baruch Hu, to the Kisei HaKavod. These things all matter. They're all important. And if somebody's not well, we have to daven for Refuah Shalema. So you'll forgive me for that week, and then in Mitzvah Shem we'll carry on. Because you know something, just think about what I'm going to say now. Don't be frightened. It's only 4 weeks till Purim, and it's 8 weeks till Pesach. So if we've got time, we can sit down, as I always have done. And we will learn in our nights, not just a bit of the Sedra, but I'll take you through the Haggadah, like I've been doing for years at the hotel. I'll take you through it. And it's a different, because you're staying at home this year again. Sorry, I'm not the Prime Minister, but you're going to be, I'm telling you, you're going to be staying at home.
I have a ticket to London, I don't believe that.
I've got Emunah, but I haven't got any betochen in the government. But that's a different story. Yeah. Anyway, have a lovely, lovely Shabbos. It's lovely seeing all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos. Speak to you tomorrow, Danny. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Oh,
okay, zwaaien.
Thank you very much, yes.
Oké, goed. Prettige avond verder allemaal en good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos. Lovely seeing you. Are you well?
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.